Hmm. Hmm. Any volunteers for a prayer?
I'll do this one.
All right,
Short.
sweet. All right. We'll now call the city council special budget meeting to order for August 28th, 4 p.m. Please rise for the invocation and pledge of allegiance. The invocation will be given by Deputy Mayor Jim Bernard.
Thank you. All right. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for being with us tonight and thank you for your love and your grace. We ask you to protect us and guide us as we go through this meeting, as well as go ahead and protect us the next few days as we're about to hit the high storm, and keep the storm as far away as possible and keep our children safe as they continue to go to school throughout this year. And we do it in Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May be seated. Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Councilmember McGuire. Here. Councilmember McCure. Here. Councilmember Taylor. Here. Deputy Mayor Bernard.
Here.
Mayor Anderson.
Here,
We have a quorum.
we have one item, one star of this show, and that is Melody.
That is,
So you go ahead when you're ready.
okay, so tonight we are going to discuss the changes that were made at the budget meeting that we had on August the 14th.
Mhm.
So the new budget or the revised budget is based on the return on investment of 1.9 million, which comes from the water sewer fund. And actually this year it's going to have to be split between the general fund and the sanitation fund.
Mhm.
The millage rate is calculated at the current rate, which is 4.3681 and also at 4.5 per your request.
Mhm.
I updated the fire assessment fee revenue. I had it at the last year's revenue, not this year. So I increased it from 666, 270 to 729. And that does not include what you guys will vote on going forward. It includes a 3% pay increase for all positions except for supervisors, the foremen, and the directors. It includes 5 supervisor positions being increased from 60,000 to 67,000. It includes 3 foreman positions being increased from 55,000 to 58,000. A new position for the budget manager at $60,000. And updated the general fund CIP. We added 350,000 for the classic palladium roof. We moved the fire department desk and the boys and girls air conditioning units from infrastructure to general fund because they're not eligible to be paid by infrastructure funds. We moved streets paving maintenance of 50,000 from capital to the expense account. And we added an ice machine at the Public Works building for 40,000. Oh, 4,000.
Okay,
Okay.
before we go forward, if you don't mind,
Mhm.
I apologize, but there's something that I just thought about over the weekend. I think that I would like to bring it up before we go any further, before we vote, or decide what we're going to do, and that's concerning the airport. As we all know, for as long as I've ever been here, the airport has always lost money. It usually lost well over $100,000 a year, so 10 years, $1 million.
Yep.
And basically, we never really had anybody out there management. At the best we ever had was maybe an employee would go out there, open and close the doors, and maybe, would order fuel or sell city manager order fuel, or even order fuel on their own, even though they shouldn't have been because nobody else was around to do it. But there were basically a lot of complaints of where if you go on, there's a location where all the pilots fly in and out and they make comments on airports. And there were so many negative comments on Avon Park. I couldn't believe about how the doors were locked, no access to the bathrooms, no access to fuel. It was just don't land there, on and on and on. It was just terrible. Well, I think with the help of the previous city council and the city council members that we have today, we realize the fact that we need to make sure that our airport needs to be the shining star in the city. And so along came a few people that we were looking into that were talking about managing the airport. Those people were usually asking for 100,000 plus for one person to manage it, and 100,000 was just basically going to cover him to be there, maybe market it, stuff like that, but never really do any physical activities out there. At the same time, FAM came along, and that pretty much, when they start talking about leasing, that kind of chased the other people away. So we all know that this has been going on for 2.5 years. It's been a long process. There's been a lot of hiccups in between, and not necessarily anybody's fault, but basically, you know, we all agreed, this council all agreed that we need to go forward with the lease as soon as possible. And basically, we've been going that direction. And basically, I believe it was April of 2022, FAM finally went into an agreement to charge $10,000 a month to maintain the airport, which was for 4 people, plus other people had been in and out of there, plus many, many volunteers, which my first concern was about getting something done with the airport was to stop losing money every year, because there was no reason for us to lose money. Now, my other concern is trying to find income for our farmers and our orange growers, because they're basically running out of ways to make money. I mean, those of you that know Jeff Williams, he's back working for the sheriff's department 30 plus hours a week because he can't make a living in orange groves. So not only has he volunteered to be out there, his father, who turns, I think, 83 this week or something, he was out there helping. They were bringing their trucks and their backhoes and flattening out the ground for future growth. And they did all this as volunteers. And yes, the city employees helped them. They worked together as a team. And then in April last year, they signed an agreement for $10,000 a month for 4 people. And I believe the reason they accepted that is because the experts that we hired to basically get us through this process kept telling us that they expected that this deal would be done by last fall. And that didn't happen, not necessarily somebody's fault. And then they said, well, it definitely will be done by the end of the year. And that didn't happen. And then they said, well, it would be January through March, or maybe even April. So come April, I mean, there were some changes made, but they've been here a year and they still are getting paid $10,000 a month for 4 people. They're physically out there working day to day, being called out in the middle of the night to fuel things. So as you can see in our budget here, we turn around and we reward city employees what is a fair pay for them being here. You know, you see that every supervisor and foreman is basically averaging making $60,000 or more. So if you couldn't get somebody to work out there at the airport, one of these people, for $30,000 a year, it just wouldn't happen. So I think there's a couple of reasons why we need to turn around and we need to pay them a fair pay and increase their pay considerably. And the reason why I say that, because I don't think there's anybody in this room or anybody that could come in on Zoom and tell us exactly when this lease is going to close. Because I don't think our experts are really experts, because this is pretty much the first time this type of a deal with a small airport partnership with the city is going through. So our experts are going through the process too, trying to learn it. But I think that we have to show our support from the city, so that we finally took us 2.5 years before we got it on the docket. But I think it'd be really good for us to show not only our appreciation for their hard work, but I think most importantly, I think that if we show that these FCC, the FAA, the FDOT, Tallahassee, Washington, anybody else, that we realize we want to support these people. We want this deal to go through, and that we're fair to our employees and we're fair to the people that work for us. So with that being said, I'm trying to make this quick because I have a lot to say, but I'm going to make it quick. I will make a motion that instead of paying them $10,000 a month, because we have no idea when this lease will come through, it may be another year or 2. And I don't think that's sufficient amount of pay is $10,000. So I make a motion that we go ahead and start the next year that we start paying them $20,000 a month. And I think that that's even less when they originally asked for was 25.
Okay, so we have a motion. Does anyone care to make a second? So unfortunately, we have to, if there's no second, then it would die for lack of second, which of course we can discuss as long as we want either way. Or you can go ahead and second it and we can discuss it with it still on the table. That is the rules.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so we have a second. So go ahead and ask your question.
So it's $10,000 per month that we're paying how many employees?
4.
Well, $2,500.
Yes. And you know as well as I do, we just went through the homeless issue. $2,500 a month doesn't really pay
Yeah.
for most of these people's, home, rent, food, gas, fuel, and so on and so forth. So they're kind of starving out there, as well as the fact they're getting called out in the middle of the night. And they're not city employees, so they don't get paid time and a half. They don't get anything extra. They go, somebody says, hey, I'm landing at 6 a.m. Can you come in early? They come in early. So I'm glad that you second it. I appreciate it. But I think what we have to show everybody that we support them 100%. We continue to support them, and we have to pay them a fair wage. Like I said, originally they asked for 25,000. I'm not too sure staff was happy with that, and I'm sure members of the staff aren't all that happy with them, because I know that they've done a lot of questions and maybe some people call a lot of complaining. But if somebody told you the deal is going to be, you're going to get your job starting in October, and come December, they're telling you, oh, it's going to be April. And then they tell you, well, it's going to be next October. And guess what? It's not going to be next October. It's going to be, if anything, next year. And they're going to continue to make the same amount of pay. So I just think we need to pay them a fair scale payment to keep them happy, to keep them interested, as well as, like I said, to show the other organizations out there that the city of Avon Park is serious, that we want this to go through. I think if they see that, I think that maybe this will go through a lot sooner, and that will turn around and relieve us from losing $100,000 a month, $1 million or 10 years, whatever. I mean, a year. I'm sorry, I apologize, but I just think it's shameful that we're willing to increase all of our foremen and all of our supervisors, which I agree 100%. We turned around and we gave our city manager a great big raise last year, which he pretty much said, I deserve this or that. And so we all decided that he needed it because it was either that or nothing. And so he got a raise. And I believe that we've given all city employees at least 2 raises in the last 3 years. So we have done a really good job of increasing our minimum wage so that we've been able to hire twice as many people as we have. And I think the city manager has done a big help in trying people to define his staff. I think we have a great staff. I think Melody does a great job when it comes to budget, because she puts it in process so we all can read it and understand it and ask the questions. But I think we have to just, maybe not everybody's out there as much as I am, because I'm the only one that doesn't have a full-time job, but I've been out there in the heat and the sweat when these guys were out there in the backhoes and the trucks, when they weren't even basically getting paid for it, because they all believe in it. And so I appreciate your second, and I hope everybody understands where I'm coming from.
How many hours is based upon? Did it have a base?
They minimum have to work 40 hours a week, minimum.
They're not though. There's not 4 guys out there 40 hours a week.
Well, there's 3 of them. One guy works 3 days a week. You're right.
I mean, I don't even think it's that much.
You know,
They're not contracted to be there 4 guys for 40 hours a week.
well,
I know that Charlie Brown is out there every
Charlie
day.
Brown's out
And
there
I think
every
there's
day.
another, isn't there 2? Do you guys know more about when they're out there, when they're not?
I don't know, every day JT's out there, he's out there, the more it's going on, more, but the actual person that's the airport manager, whatever position they want to call him, he's out there 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Yeah, which is, what's his name again?
Michael.
Mike
Michael
Powell.
Powell, yeah.
And then there's Charlie, and then there's Adam. I don't know if Adam's out there 40 hours, but him and Charlie are the ones that do. most
Adam's
of
the younger
Yeah,
guy.
JT's
yeah.
nephew, does a lot of the mowing.
Got it. Yeah, so I mean, that's not really what they were contracted for, is, they didn't come to us and say, look, if you give us $10,000 a month, we'll have 4 guys out here, 40 hours a week. That wasn't really the circumstances. It doesn't mean that it can't be the circumstances, but that definitely wasn't what it was for. I think the more important question is, let's say that there wasn't any lease going forward and that the FAA just told us flat out, no, this isn't going to happen. At that point, what would you want staffing level to be? I guess is probably a more important question. And would we want to continue with this arrangement if there was no FAA deal?
Well, first of all, they would not stay there. There wasn't a deal. And possibly somebody like Charlie may put in for a position to be the airport manager. He's gone out and taken lessons and gotten different classes
Yeah.
approved.
So I guess to be more specific with the question is, do you think that it's a 4-man job if there is no FAA deal? You know, in other words, if this FAA never came along,
Mhm.
realistically, what is the staffing level that you think it requires at the airport? And that's sort of the line of thinking that we should think about funding. As far as, you know, them jumping forward and offering the 10, I mean, that wasn't, you know, the city didn't ask them to do that. That was something that they wanted. And I mean, if we were going to be the most fiscally responsible, we probably shouldn't have paid anybody anything in the interim. Only if there's a deal completed, should anybody get any money. And that's my opinion. But back to the staffing question, what do you think should be out there if there was no FAA deal?
Well, I think there should be at least 3 people out there, and you know, part of the reason why I think that you look and see what they've done over the last year or year and a half, they've turned around and they basically cleaned up the place. They've gotten inspections out there to pass, which have never passed in the previous. They pointed out things to the city that were needed to be fixed and repaired, like the gates. I don't even know if the gates code still works right, and the fencing needs to be replaced. They put in for grants to get turn lanes put into the airport, and they've also turned around and they promoted several different companies willing to come in and put their business up there. They got 2 flight schools. I believe there's 2 flight schools out there, and they're not paying any rent whatsoever. And not that they're not willing to, but because they don't have leased the airport, they're just manage it. And it's up to the city manager whether he wants to charge anybody new coming in or pay the lease, as well as the fact that part of the reason that we always lost money is because everybody that stayed out there pretty much paid the same amount of rent year after year after year after year, just because we were just being kind to, you know, locals that not to have them pay a fair share, and then the city just bite the bullet and lost it. But yeah, I do think you need at least 3 people out there.
Well, I think the whole reason they wanted to do the deal was because of the lease deal that's coming, though. They never signed up to come out there and just to manage the airport and us pay them. They don't want to be our employees. They want this lease deal to go through. So
Right.
this was supposed to be an until arrangement. So everything they're doing out there is to better their chances of having a prosperous
Right.
enterprise at a later point once this lease comes through. So if it was just our employees out there and we were having them do different things and it was going to be a long-term arrangement, I would say, okay, well, let's assess how much work is actually being done. But there is the promise of a prosperous venture right around the corner. And I feel like that's what spurs them to do what they do, which I'm very appreciative of and very excited about it. But I don't think we should treat them the same as our employees. That's my opinion.
Well, the prospect out there is also going to bring jobs to the city. It's going to bring money to the city. It's going to help restore families to make a living, our farmers and growers. I mean, there's a lot of business opportunities that are out there, and yeah, sure, that's what they're out there for. But, you know, like you said, like I said, you know, we kept telling them, oh, the deal's going to be done in a couple of months. Oh, it's going to be done next year. Oh, it's going to be
Yeah, but
done.
we had no way to know,
Exactly.
and neither did they. So they signed the agreement just in the dark as we were. So that was their option to either jump on board and ride the train with us or hop off and go somewhere else.
Okay.
But I feel like they see enough promise in the venture that they would want to stick it out. I mean, that's my personal opinion. I appreciate it, all of that they're doing out there, and I like every single one of them. I feel like, you know, we got a good thing going. I just don't want to put them in the same category as our city employees.
So I have a question for you, Jim.
Yes, ma'am.
Did they know what the deal was when they went, and how did this conversation come up? Are they complaining about what they're getting paid now? They feel like they're doing more work than they was doing in the past? And they should be compensated for it? Is that what's going on?
Well, this is what I know,
Mhm.
and it could be different than what the city manager and the financial director may know something different. They can put in their comments. I believe that originally, like I said, those that offered just to go out and manage the airport, just as they were coming in, were asking $100,000 or more just to manage it, which means all they were gonna do there is open and close the doors, probably get things ordered, possibly market to bring businesses in there so that the idea would be is if the airport made money, then they would be able to get increases in pay as they continue the management. But then FAM came along and said, well, you know, we want to basically lease it and bring business and economy to the airport. And because of the fact that there were some hiccups in originally it was a 3P plan, and then went to the AIPP plan. This is basically the first company that's going to do this, and I believe in the state of Florida, at least for a small airport. And so their idea was, you know, yes, they were hopeful that, you know, they would get this done. Originally, they were told, you know, maybe a year or year and a half. Well, we're now in a year, 2.5. And other than saying that something's on the docket, they don't have a clue. And I believe that the city manager can tell me if I'm wrong. I believe that they originally asked, they thought $25,000 a month was fair. And I believe the city manager probably told me thought that was too much, because we looked at other people for $100,000 a year for one person. And he could tell me whether I'm right or wrong. But I just think that they've gone out there and are trying to do the job and set up the job, yes, so they can go ahead and move forward as a business. It's got not only going to be good for them, but it's going to be great for the city of Avon Park. And everybody on this board has said before, we support that 100%. Because of the fact it's going to bring employees out there, it's going to bring revenue to the city. We're no longer going to be $100,000 in debt every year, and we turn around and we're going to have other businesses out there, which will bring even more revenue to the city. So I think yes, they're doing something that maybe necessarily they weren't told they had to do, but they've done it in preparation to the point where they hoped that they would get the lease sooner than later. And the fact that our experts were not experts in this field. Basically, you know, I remember a year ago, January, Lowell Cleary told me personally, right to my face, said, this deal is going to happen this year. These are great people out there. This is a great company. And you guys are going to be very fortunate to have them out there, at least in the airport. You're going to be really lucky. It's going to happen this year. Well, he wasn't an expert about that and didn't have the right answer. It didn't happen that year. It didn't happen the end of the year. It didn't happen in January, February, March, and so on and so forth. Nobody really knows. So they went in there with the intention of wanting 25,000. I guess the city manager offered them 10,000. Quote me if I'm wrong. They took it with the idea that they didn't think it was fair, but they thought, well, in 6 months or a year at the most, we're going to get this lease. Well, now nobody knows when the lease is going to come. The lease may never come. So we have to determine, do we want to continue to have them out there and run the airport the way it is now? Or do we want to just say, this is all you're going to get, and I hope you get the lease. And if you don't, then I'll be on the record to say, if we don't, and I'm not saying it's just my opinion, then we might lose the whole deal. And then we'll be back to losing $100,000 a year again. So like I said, I've been out there more. I've seen them working. I see what they do. I mean, I've seen the plans. I've talked to the people that fly in that are looking for more hangars out there. I mean, once they take over this lease, they're going to bring so much business to the airport that I think it's going to at least double in the first couple of years. And then I think it's just a big, big plus. And I think it's important for the city to support them. And this is one way of doing it. That's my opinion. Everybody else has a right to their own opinion, but I appreciate the second I got from Shelley. And any way you vote or any comments that the manager has to say, I'm more than willing to listen to them. But I've said my piece, and I just want to make sure that where everybody knew where I stood in case anybody agreed with me before we finalize this budget.
Before Mark say anything, I have a question. So let me make sure I'm understanding this right. If the deal do go through at the airport, then what happened to them then? It's a possibility that they may get employment with the airport?
If the deal goes through, Mark will tell you, they will lease the entire airport and they'll be in charge of the airport, promoting it, building it up, bringing new businesses within the airport. One of the businesses
But
could bring
we
in.
would still be paying them.
No,
Okay.
no,
Okay.
no, they'll have a lease of at least 39 or 40 years. And after so many years, they'll have to start paying us a certain amount of money. It's all in the contract, but we don't have to pay them anything. And if anybody says I'm wrong, let's go ahead and tell me I'm wrong. But the fact is, I think I think we all agreed when we voted for it, that it was a win-win for everybody. Unfortunately, it just has taken way, way, way too long. And I just don't think that it's fair to pay these people you know, basic living to get by just because we don't have to. So,
And I agree with you 100%, Jim. That's why I was bitching and complaining about the employees with the 3%. Everything has gone up.
Yeah.
We saw it through the homeless meeting. Everything has gone up. And to me, 3% was like a slap in the face.
Yeah.
But then here we are
Mhm.
contracted, want to raise somebody for contract, doing contracting work. I agree with you.
thank you.
I think that they should get a raise until the lease come through, or maybe we set some type of deadline and say, okay, we'll give them this until here. And then after that, if we don't get the lease, then we're back to where it was. I think they should get a raise. Everything has gone up. It's hard to live. Even in the little town of Avon Park, it's hard to live. Everything is going up. And we're not gonna even talk about the stuff that we're raising here. Yeah.
Jim, I have a question. I'm sorry, Ms. Taylor, were you
I'm done.
finished? I didn't mean to cut you
Okay,
off.
No,
So right now they're doing the $10,000 a month, right?
Yeah.
Okay, which breaks down to each employee, whether it's 3 or 4, based on 40 hours, it's at 1563 roughly. Right? So you're asking for the 20,000? That would increase them to $31.
Okay, but these are not what I would call regular workers. These are actually management type people.
I think it would be more responsible to get a financial breakdown from them. How many hours are they spending there? Where's the money going before we just throw a blanket? Here's 20 grand. Let's see who's getting paid what and what for.
Okay,
I'd
well,
like to know their hours.
Yeah, because if
would
they're only
too.
working
How many
3 days a
They
week.
working and how many hours they working a day?
Yeah.
well, they'll be here later on the part of the budget, so we'll let them, you can ask them all those questions that you want. I just wanted to get up front before we got close to picking out our budget choices now, or see where we're leaning at. That's the only reason why I brought it up now, but if you guys want to wait till they're here and ask them all those questions, feel free.
So can we do that? Can we just,
So we have a motion and a second on the table, so you would
Right.
have to either approve it or deny it before we go forward. So you can make we can have a motion to table it indefinitely. So someone would have to make a motion to table this motion indefinitely.
okay, well then, I'll go ahead and make the motion to table it until we have a chance to speak with them and
So
see
the-
what their
the
hours.
Correct motion would be to table the current motion indefinitely.
Okay, I'll go ahead and table the motion. What?
Current motion indefinitely.
I'll table the current motion indefinitely.
Is there a second?
Second.
it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the tabling? Seeing,
The only discussion I would say is let's just find out what they work. I know they work hard. I get it,
Mhm.
but let's see what their hours are. I'd like to see what they actually do.
Yeah, I just think the best question to ask is, would we still want this situation if there was no FAA deal? We do not want to get in the habit of paying people to apply for things. That is lunacy. So I think we all know the answer, that we would not have FAM out there. We would not be paying anyone $10,000 a month or any number per month out there if this wasn't going through. So
So you're saying,
it's very simple.
I beg your pardon, then. So what you're saying is that we wouldn't pay anybody to be a manager out there.
Well, we certainly wouldn't be we wouldn't want 3 or 4 people to be contracted out there. Realistically, it's a maybe 1.5 person job. We had Danielle that did a lot of the stuff out there that was, an hour or 2 a week. Like, it was ridiculous how little.
And what condition was the airport that time?
It wasn't a whole heck of a lot different than it is right now, Jim.
Really?
Yeah,
Well, that's your opinion.
that's the truth. And to
May
say
I-
that we didn't pass the inspections, we didn't pass the inspections on several occasions, but I can tell you the airport's been out there for 100 and some odd years. So we must have been doing something right for quite a long time.
Mayor, can I just add a couple?
Go ahead.
Mayor, I had a question. You just told Jim that realistically, it is a 1.5 person job. At what pay rate?
At whatever the heck a person that works at airport's pay rate is, I have no idea. That's not something I've sat there and thought about. It's the first time I've heard about it when Jim brought it up.
That size airport, when we looked, an airport manager was only making about 60,000. But I'm gonna say, I don't disagree with Jim. Maybe they need more money. I'm not. But there's something, this is a management agreement, so that'd have to be amended, because in it, they get $10,000.
Right.
So that, and they agreed to that. I don't remember them wanting 25. Jim, it's been so long, they may have, I don't know. But I can tell, one thing that came up was there's managers out there. No, there's not. You've got one manager out there with the experience, and that's Mike Powell. He's the only one with any experience in the airport. Charlie Brown has none. Adam has none. They're the same as the people who mow. Now, Charlie can learn, but as Melody will tell you, we already have problems with them with collecting rent and late fees and all that stuff. So they're not managers out. Mike Powell is, but he only works there 3 days a week.
Yeah.
So, but the whole thing is this would have to be under the management agreement and be amended because it says in there exactly what positions they're supposed to have. Now, I will tell you that, they got Santiago. Well, they pay him, I guess, some on the side. So some of it is beyond managing the airport. It's their vision's great. I hope just half of it comes true and we'll have a lot of businesses out there. But a lot of it, they're working on that stuff.
Right. Yeah. Okay, well, we have a motion to table. We have a motion and a second, so there's no more discussion. We'll call the roll.
Yes, sir. Councilmember McGuire,
Yes.
Councilmember McCure,
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Bernard,
Yes,
Mayor Anderson.
Yes.
Motion to table passes.
All right, so that staff is clear, we were requesting them to give us a breakdown of the hours and what else?
The employees and the hours.
Okay,
I believe they'll be here with the city council meeting.
well, I doubt they're gonna have it in their pocket, but regardless.
Okay.
Is there anything else besides what we just mentioned?
No, sir.
Okay,
Employees, hours and the days.
Pay rate,
I
how much
can-
they're actually
yeah.
paying them.
Yep.
Days.
And I think we need to know what the responsibilities of each one of them are. If that's even possible or if that's. a
I'm
thing.
sure that we'll get a very long-winded, flowery answer. The question is what really is happening out there, so. If you were told to come up with why you hold the job that you hold, I'm sure you could probably come up with a lot of really good things.
Well, I didn't know that that was how. I just thought we were gonna ask them their hours and their, what did you say, their hours? I didn't know.
Their
that-
hours, duties.
What they were doing. Okay.
Okay. Back to the budget. Melody, please proceed.
Okay, so we are all the way through, excuse me, the general fund CIP, the updated water and wastewater fund CIP, we updated vehicles in there. We had 2 350s budgeted. We changed them to F-250s and it actually increased the price by 4,000 because of the quotes that we got last year.
Mhm.
And
So
we-
to be clear, if it would have stayed as 350s, it would have been more than
Even
124,000.
correct. And then we changed the F-550 to an F-250, which reduced the price from 95,000 to 62,000.
Okay,
I have a question for you, Melanie, at
Uh-huh.
this point.
Mhm.
The public work director, that didn't make it into changes? Position.
Yes, that was in there already, I think. Yeah, it was already in the budget at 95. Based on, it was in there for August 14th. It was already included.
So we have a public works director?
We do not, but the position is vacant and it's budgeted.
Okay.
any other questions?
Okay.
All right,
Okay, the next slide just shows the fire assessment calculation, the formula that Stan Tech uses to come up with the amount of money per property class. And this slide is a different slide than the one that you had in your packet. Councilmember McGuire had a question about something, and after researching it, I reached out to Stan Tech and they helped me revise this table. So this is not, you're not voting on this tonight. I just wanted to show you guys some options because we are going to discuss the balanced budget, which will depend on how much revenue the fire assessment brings in, how much we're going to take from reserves and how much we're going to take from the enterprise fund.
And to be clear, the percentages cannot be played with at all.
At the top, no, because that's a calculation that they do based on the number of calls to each one of those.
Okay.
Yeah. So right now it was advertised at 54%, which would bring in $540,000 more than we have budgeted.
Got it.
Okay. The next table, this shows your funds and your fund balances. So each fund runs alone by itself. So if you look at the first column for the general fund, our total revenues are 8.8 million. Our total expenses are 10.6 million, which leaves us a deficit of almost $1.8 million. When we do transfers in from the airport, which is the loan payment, we transfer in $1,582,740 from the wastewater fund. And we transfer out to the airport fund $469,650. We are at a deficit of $670,890. Which will be taken from reserves. If we, at the very bottom, if we vote the ad valorem tax at 4.5 mils, you'll add an additional $52,340. And if you had the fire assessment at the 54%, we'd bring in an additional 540,000. And we would still take 78,000 from the reserves.
Melody, can I ask you a question? Do you have an idea that where the airport will stand financially at the end of the year under the current contract with FAM Management? Are we going to be a plus or negative? Do you have any idea?
At the end of this current year, we're going to be at a zero reserve. That's how we are always at a zero if we take money from the general fund.
Mhm.
So in fiscal year 23-24, we had the general fund has to fund the airport fund $670,000
Per year, for 1 year?
for fiscal year 23-24. Yep.
Okay, so,
I don't have the I can get the back for you if you
no,
want it.
but you're saying
Previous years.
well over 600,000, the airport will be in the negative.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So you're the same thing with the water wastewater fund. Our revenues are 6.2 million. Our total expenses are 7.1 million, which is a loss of 890,000. Now that includes capital. So realistically, the general fund makes about, 1.7 million, or the wastewater fund makes about 1.7 million.
Okay.
And you can see at the bottom, we transfer out to the general fund 1.5 million and out to the sanitation fund 317,000, which leaves a fund balance of 6.4 million. The airport fund, our revenues are 839,000. Our expenses are almost 1.3 million, which leaves a deficit of $436,940. But we also have two payments that go out from that fund, one to the general fund and one to the sanitation fund. And with the transfer in from the general fund of $469,650, they have a zero fund balance. Sanitation kind of works the same way. Their revenues are 1.6 million. Their expenses are almost 1.2 million, which leaves a deficit of 364,000. With the transfer in from the airport and a transfer in from the wastewater fund of 317,000, at the end of the year, they'll have a zero fund balance.
The sanitation, they derive their revenues from our garbage bills.
Yes.
Okay. Is that the sole source?
Yes.
Okay. So the revenue that comes from the pump trucks, things like that. That doesn't go into sanitation. That goes
No,
into water,
that's-
wastewater.
Water, wastewater.
Okay.
Mhm. And I actually reached out to Stan Tech. I've learned that they actually provide garbage rate studies.
Okay.
So I've reached out to them to get a little bit of information from them.
We need it desperately.
Yep. Of course, our CRAs in and out, we have to spend what we bring in, what the fund balance is. And the infrastructure fund, we bring in 1.6 million this year. Our budgeted expenses are almost 1.8. So we will take 190 from that reserve, which will leave about 6.7 million in that reserve.
Okay.
And then the next slide is just the slide that once we vote on it on the 11th, this is what will appear in the newspaper that all the residents will see.
Okay.
And that's the end of the presentation.
Any other questions?
I just have one question. Back when we originally talked to Stan Tech, there were a few areas that were supposed to be, they were in the excluded category and they weren't going to be charged, but he was going to go back and take a look at that. Do you know if if he has looked at those and if those are included in these, like these vacant properties, this 992?
Do you know?
What are you doing, Andy? Okay, so obviously we'll be voting on this at our next meeting. So we need to have any of these questions we need to have cleared up by that next meeting.
Correct.
Awesome. Is there any other questions for Stan Tech anybody can come up with that they want them to ask?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Because this has come up with a couple people calling in. Because the non-residential has gone up so high, some people are gonna go up 250% or more, and you've taken some phone calls probably too, right? When we were on with Stan Tech, UI and Melly were on with them. I think if I remember right, you two can help me. They said that it would go up a lot higher going up. It would be much higher because someone lowered the rates. The rates based off the residential weren't correct when it was done in 2015. That's why it's going to go up so high in 1 year if they move to the 185 or anything above the 140. Do either one of you remember that? Can you ask him that then? I'm pretty sure he said that these rates really weren't based off the 140 when it was done in 2015, because that's going to answer some questions that people are going to show up here at the public hearing.
Yep.
Okay.
They were the ones that did the study in 2015, right?
Well, another company did, but I think they became Stan Tech, but he didn't do it.
Oh,
Someone else
okay.
did it.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions for Melody or any staff?
Nope. Great job, Melody.
Thank you.
All right.
And I just want to be clear because when we meet on the September 11th, it will be our tentative budget meeting. So anything that you would like me to change, if we could speak about it this evening, other than the fire assessment, because you'll vote on that on Monday.
Mhm.
And then we also got news today, which will come before you on the 11th at our health insurance. We budgeted for a 9% increase and it's actually 12%,
Oh,
At least.
at least 12%.
I know what's chosen. Did you want me to
Okay.
handle the FRS?
Mhm.
Good. We, or I and Melody spoke about the FRS rates. Last time we were here, we said we are going to get back to you. We found out, well, one, elected officials could be much higher, but when we got with the FRS and went back to the resolution that was done in 2015, or it was on council at the time, agreed that council would be at the regular employees rate and it could never change. So we tried.
Okay.
Because actually it was
Fine.
56, I
58.
thought it was 51, it's 58 for elected officials. The other one is I brought up about department head, senior management with Melody and what would be a public works director. We spoke to Sebring, all theirs are in the county, the ones that weren't are going to it this year. That would, regular employee is 13.57, senior management's 34.52. Melody has the numbers broken down. It would be, well, you tell them because you got initials there, I think I know what they mean, but
So the total addition to the budget would be $36,380. 8240 would be the general fund. 24,020 would be the water fund, and 4,120 would be the sanitation fund.
Anything else?
Nope.
Seeing none, but that concludes our agenda. If there's nothing else for the good of the city, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, please.
Seeing no opposition, we are adjourned.